All right, fans, joining me now on this week's Spotlight. I am joined by former WWE. He's a former WWE World Tag Team Champion. He was part of Right to Censor, that Hillish group right there that was on SmackDown and Raw back in the day in the early 2000s. Bull, how are you doing? And thank you for joining me on this week's The Final Count Spotlight.
Thank you for having me. I'm doing great. I'm doing great. Just enjoying the nice weather here in Georgia. How is it where you're at?
Going pretty good. The weather's I'm up here in Kentucky actually.
Yeah.
I'm in
Okay.
Louisville actually, yeah. And so I'm in the right in the backyard of OVW pretty much, and so
Oh God, I
having
feel
spent a
like I
lot of
spent
time.
half my life in Louisville.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. We'll get into that, but first of all, I want to ask you. You know, everyone has that moment that made them want to get into the pro wrestling business. Everyone has that moment, even if they're not in the business, they have that moment that made them a fan. When did you decide, or what was that moment that made you a fan and want to get into the pro wrestling business?
There was actually a couple of them. The first one was when I first started watching wrestling. My big heroes were Mr. Wrestling #2 and Tommy Rich because here in Georgia, that's what I got at the time.
Right.
And Ole Anderson and Ivan Koloff, I think, got him on TV and cut his hair. Now I'm 7 or 8 years old, and I remember going into my bedroom and crying, bawling, just because they cut Tommy Rich's hair. And I started thinking about it then, because I was already bigger than most of the kids in my class.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd already started kind of mulling it over in my head, and then uh, David Von Erich's death was one of the things that I was a huge Freebird and Von Erich fan, because at that time, now I could get Georgia and world class, and
Right.
his death and just the whole thing surrounding it, I kind of made up my mind, because David kind of looked like I did at the time. He was tall, he was kind of lanky, and I could relate to that. So I could see somebody, okay, well, if he could do it, maybe I could do it.
Mm.
And later on, I got to watching Magnum TA, and if anybody looks at my high school portrait, it's very obvious I was trying to do a very poor imitation of him. I had the mullet, the perm mullet, the big cheesy mustache. I was doing my best, but I actually went to a Deep South taping in Carrollton, Georgia, which is it's the next town over,
Right.
and it was Deep South at the time that it was right after Georgia Championship. So I think it was Jody was running it,
Yes. Yes.
but Bob Armstrong still was there. Wrestling Two was there. And I did my best to dress up as much like an 80s rock star that night as I could. And with the hair and the mustache, I walked in and I could see people turn and look at me like they thought I was somebody. And I wasn't. I was doing my best to look like somebody. But
Right.
when that happened, I was like, okay, I can do this. I can do this. So
That's
yeah.
awesome. I love that. And so were those this kind of leads into my next question. Who were some of your inspirations? Were they some of your inspirations? The
Oh
Von
yeah.
Erichs and
Absolutely, absolutely. Tommy Rich wrestling. You like all the good guys and you hate all the bad guys.
yeah.
The Freebirds were the first bad guys that I really liked. But Tommy Rich wrestling too, Bob Armstrong. And what's so cool about it is that later when I got into it, I actually got to work with all these guys.
Right.
I even got to work wrestling too, and it was way later on after he'd already retired. He came back to Georgia and did a little thing, and I actually got to be in the ring with him. But
That's awesome.
and then it was the Von Erichs and the Freebirds. I was a huge Terry Gordy fan. Looking back, well, uh, when I trained my son, Ben Brooks Jensen,
Mhm.
I told him to watch Terry Gordy, because it was already obvious to me that he moved just like I did, which I don't know if that's good or bad, but I did my best to, that's where I pulled a lot of my stuff from, was Terry Gordy and some other people, Booker T. I loved the fact that Booker T was a big guy that could move, and I tried
Definitely.
my best to keep up with him. He did a leg drop off the top one night, he turned a flip and turned it into a leg drop, and I tried it one time, and my face hit my own knee, and
Oh,
I think it broke my nose, and never went to the hospital. But yeah, I had to pull out there. He had me there. But Magnum TA was huge. Like I said, Von Erichs. But yeah, and getting into business, I tell people all the time, you never know where you're gonna get a nugget from. You never know who or when somebody's gonna say something that's gonna resound in your mind, and it's something that you'll take with you forever. But
very true.
yeah. But yeah, and I got to, of course, I didn't get to work with Magnum. It would have been great. But I didn't get to work with Von, but I got to work with two. I got to work with Tommy Rich and a lot of other guys. I mean, Wahoo McDaniels, of course, Dusty, uh, just the typical baby faces.
Right. So now, who were you trained by? Your initial training. Who were you trained by?
I was, there was I just got out of college. I went to college to play basketball, and I just got out of college, and some wrestling popped up here in my hometown where I live in Bowden, and it drove me nuts. I just had to get down there and see what was going on, and I remember riding by one night, and I looked in there, and Junkyard Dog was wrestling, and I said, "Shit, I got to figure out how to, But I really didn't know how to approach them, because back then, late '80s, early '90s. You kind of still had to know somebody to get in a lot of times. But I found out who's running it, and I went down there and talked. His name was James Hammonds. He wrestled as Olin James. He was a local guy around here. He was trained by Ted Allen, the same guy that trained Big Boss Man and
Oh wow.
yeah, and Arn Anderson. So I went and talked to him, and he was straight up front with me. He said, "Well, you're probably not going to make any money, and you're probably going to get hurt." And I said, "Okay, well, I'll go home and think about that." And I worked at a furniture store. I delivered furniture, and right next door, these guys moved in, and they were training out there. So I walked over there one night, and to my surprise, and actually pretty happy about it, there was a few guys in there I knew from in town. I didn't know they did it. So I got in there, and they started showing me stuff, and James came in. James is a big guy. He's like 6'4", 6'5", 300 pounds, big barrel chest, big beard, just real rough looking dude. And I remember they showed me a few things, and I could tell, he wasn't all that impressed. And he got in there with me, and he still had his shirt on from work. And he said, "Have they showed you how to chop yet?" And I said, "No, sir." He was unbuttoning his shirt as he was walking over the corner. He went to the corner, just laid back. He said, "Chop me." So I said, well, I've been watching this since I was 7 or 8. I know what it is, but I don't really know how to do it. Because to be honest with you, and even still back in the early '90s, there was a lot of people, knew that pro wrestling may not be on the up and up, but you always waited for those times that you thought it might be.
Right.
It's almost watching a race to see the wreck. You don't really want anybody to get hurt, but you want to see it.
Right.
But yeah, so I threw the worst chop in the history of chops, and he said, "Nah, I ain't how you do it." He turned me around and he blistered my chest, and but after that, nobody ever had to tell me, how to do it because I knew. But he was great, man. We used to practice out in his back. Me and a guy named Scott McCulley. If you go back and look in Memphis in about 96, 97, he wrestled his Bulldog Reigns.
Oh wow.
And we trained together. He wound up, I think he went to Puerto Rico. He wrestled all over the South. But yeah, we trained together. So we trained in James' backyard, and it'd be in the middle of summertime, 400 degrees out there, mosquitoes, and we were just tickled to death to be able to get in a ring and do it.
Exactly. So now this is going back as well. Do you remember your first match? And if so, what was that like?
Oh, absolutely. It was with James. It was in Heflin, Alabama. There was about 250 people there. I was so scared walking. I came out to ACDC, TNT.
Oh, wow.
And I was so scared walking to the ring. I had this big leather jacket on. Mm-hmm. I was so scared that people were trying. I was the good guy. I was the baby face. People were trying to shake my hand, and I almost ran to the ring and jumped in the ring, and I was scared to death. But he got me through it. Uh, we did he gave me a suplex on the outside on the concrete, and I wasn't about to say no. I mean, he had asked me about it, and I said, sure, whatever.
Right.
But being young and hell, we did it. But no, me and him had some good matches. Actually, we wrestled outside in it was a slow rain that turned into a slow ice or sleet, whatever you call it.
Sounds like Kentucky weather.
Yeah, and it was springtime, of course, in Georgia. The day before it was 70 degrees, and then we're out there, and we were outside, but hell, we were having fun, man. And it's funny. You look back, and no matter how much money you make or what you achieve in this, you look at when you get my age. I think you always look back and think about it. Those were the best times. It wasn't when you were making any money, but it was just the fact of you were doing it. You've been dreaming about doing this your whole life. You were doing it with people that were your friends. So yeah, good time.
That's awesome that you got to have your first match with your trainer. And then I love about the match with the rain and snow and everything.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Like I said, like Kentucky weather, because
yes, absolutely.
Obviously, Kentucky weather can be like bipolar.
Yes. Yes.
While we're talking about matches, if you could pick 3 matches that you've had in your wrestling career, what matches would you pick as your top 3 favorite matches? I know that's a hard question.
Not really. Not really. As far as 2-star, 3-star, whatever match, me and D'Lo Brown against Marufuji and Segura for the GHC tag titles in the Budokan. Me and D'Lo had won the tag titles, and we wrestled Marufuji and Segura in the Budokan at the end of the tour. And we actually wound up losing, and still got a standing ovation after it was over. It was just a good. It was because my other favorite match was pretty short, but it was like 25, 30 minutes. We got to really pour on the steam and hit some big stuff. And if I had to point to my stuff, it'd probably be to that one or Godfather, me and Godfather, it was actually the week before he joined the RTC when he lost the girls. We were wrestling, for the girl. If I won, he lost the girls. Mm-hmm. And the fans were losing their minds because, it wasn't nothing about me. Right. And it wasn't even so much about him. Mm-hmm. They didn't want to see the girls go.
Right.
So and I mean, back then, you couldn't really tell. So, the God fans were into it. And when Stevie hit him with the chair and I went up and hit oh my God, you could see people just, the air just went out of the place. Yeah, I guess number 3 would be either one of the matches that I've done with both my sons. Brooks Jensen, we actually wound up, I wanted to tag with them just to say I did it, just kind of for me, so, man, that's kind of cool. You did something with your son. Definitely. And me and Ben wound up turning it into a complete damn tour of the state of Georgia.
Oh, wow.
I didn't really mean it to be like that. But yeah, we wound up, and I actually wound up with a couple of belts down here, promotion in Monroe, Georgia, Southern Fried, who wound up as their tag team champions. And it took me 3 years to recover from that run I had with him. And I've done, I think, 1 or 2 matches with my youngest son Zach, who's starting out now.
But how cool is that? That's so cool to be able to say that you were a tag team champion with one of your sons, and then that you've had matches with your sons. That's really cool. I love that.
Yeah. And for anybody that follows NXT or behind the scenes or any of the guys in NXT, that was really cool. I got to go down there and do the guest coaching thing and
Yeah.
meet a lot of those guys. Man, they're all real cool. They're all real hungry, and man, they're some studs down there. I told Ben when I left Brooks, I told him, I said, man, hey, you got to bring your A game because these guys, they're all D1 something.
Mm-hmm.
They're all great athletes, and they got they just need a chance.
Right. Exactly.
But I actually had a match against Ben, and I trained Ben, pretty snug. That's the way I was trained.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is it's not ballet, and we get paid a lot of money to make this look good. So I know the guys down there know how he works, but we did a little angle where I actually worked against him. And I can tell you, I chopped. We were my plan going into it. If anybody's watched, I think it's 2005, 2006, from Pro Wrestling Noah. It was right before me and D'Lo got there. Kobashi against Kinski Sasaki, and they had the 6-minute chop fest. My intention was to replicate that, and he chopped me one time, and I bailed. I said, you know what? I did something else.
Right.
Yeah, I learned my lesson on that one. But no, they're both good. They're both great kids. Great kids.
That is so awesome. I love that. Thanks for sharing that story right there.
Yep.
How did your time in USWA come to be, and what was it like working with a young Rock when he was Flex Cavana?
So I went to Smoky Mountain with Jim Cornette,
Mhm.
and when Smoky Mountain shut down, I was still there, and he told me, he said, because he really took me under his wing. He's one of my mentors. He really took me under his wing, really, and he took care of me later on too. Once I had got there, when he was still there, and anytime I wanted to come down and work in OVW or anything he had going, it was always cool. But he told me, he said, just keep working, and I'll get you I'll get you at least I'll get you a job. I said, I at least get you a tryout. So I said, okay. And so I worked around, but I'd worked in Smoky Mountain. So now I've got a little bit of a name there. So I can, branched up into Tennessee, a little bit in Kentucky, North Carolina, the old Smoky Mountain territory. I could still get booked there pretty good. And I was, still doing Alabama and Georgia. But I got a chance to go to ECW with a friend of mine named Billy Black. Billy actually called me. That Billy and Joel Deaton were a tag team in Japan.
Oh wow.
And Paul E was wanting to bring in a tag team from Japan. Well, he got in touch with Billy, but Joel was out of pocket. I think he was in Puerto Rico. So anyway, he couldn't make the shot. So Billy said, well, I know a big kid I've been working with down here. He said, let me call him. So he called me, and I said, hell yeah, And but because this was after the thing with New Jack, so Paulie and Jimmy were kind of butting heads at that point. So I remember calling Jimmy and saying, "Hey, is this cool?" And he was like, "Absolutely, go up there and show them what you got." So I went up there. We had a really good outing. I thought they really liked us. They were going to bring us back. And I got home, and a few days later, Cornette called me and said, "Hey." He said, sign your contract and you're in. I said, hi, what the hell? He said, I saw Vince at TV, and I told him that, I've been telling him about you, the big kid I had in Smoky Mountain. He said, yeah, he just debuted for Paul over there. And he said, go ahead and sign him. Now, at the time, none of us knew that they were actually kind of working together.
Right.
But yeah. So I got signed with them, and, another bucket list moment for a kid like me. I'm sitting at home, and I signed my contract. I went up there. Back then they brought you. I don't know how they do it now, but they brought you up to Stanford. You did a tour of the building with J.J. Dillon, who was over talent, at that time, right before he left. And then you sat down with Vince and talked to him, about what was going on. Well, Me and Rocky were up there on the same day. We were signing our deals, and on the same day, so we met each other up there. But I was sitting at home like May something, and I get a call, and hello. He said, "Hey, this is Jerry Lawler," and I said, "Holy," I had to I had to put my hand over the, we still had landlines back then. I had to put my hand over the phone and kind of get myself together. Oh shit, this is Jerry Lawler on the phone. So I said, "Yes, sir, Mr. Law." But another, getting to and got to work with Jerry, God, several times, with Bill Dundee several times, with all the legends from out there that I didn't get to work with in Smoky Mountain. But yeah, I went down there, and I think I drove in. I actually still did. I still did an independent show the night before. It was on a Friday night at Diller's Music Park. I did that show, and I drove all the way to Memphis that night, and I slept out in the parking lot in my car until I saw people start going in, and I got out and went in and found Jerry, and said, "Hey, yes sir, and I think that was my first TV match. Actually, it was
Oh wow.
me and Tony Falk, I think,
Mm-hmm.
against Rocky and Bart Sawyer,
Wow.
another good friend of mine.
Mm-hmm.
And he was actually down there on contract too. The three of us were down there. I think the three of us might actually have been the first so-called developmental class.
Wow.
I think. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I know that Glenn Jacobs Kane was getting. I don't know if he was getting money in Smoky Mountain or if they were just really like looking at him or what. But you know, but yeah, we were all three down there on contract, and yeah, we just we worked down there, and sporadically they would bring us up to Stanford to just we'd get in the ring with Dr. Tom and roll around, and they'd take a look at us, I guess, just to
Right.
sometimes the riders would come by I remember seeing Russo over there, they would come through and just kind of stop and look at you and just see if you can get an ideal. A lot of times just looking at somebody, you can get an ideal for a story or a character.
Exactly. So from USWA, how did your initial time in WWE come to be, and before being in OVW, and then how did your time in OVW come to be? Because I know you did some like house shows and things like that before going to OVW.
Yeah. So I went down to Memphis the first time. I think I wrestled as the Punisher because that's what I was in Smoky Mountain. Went home for a month or two, and then I got a call from Stanford. I had to fly up for a costume fitting, and they flew us all up to Stanford. Me, Robin Smith, the Commandant, Kurgan, and at the Mantar, Mike Halleck at the time. They flew us all up there. We met the Commandant. Robin Smith was an actual South African soldier, so he showed us how to march and do all get in the ring. We figured all that stuff out. We worked on a few moves. And they sent us down to Memphis, and we worked down there until they called us up. We had to run as Truth Commission, and after that WrestleMania, I can never remember numbers. It's where Austin beat Shawn for the belt.
14,
Tyson,
15.
yes, Tyson was there.
Yes.
After that WrestleMania, because I think we were in like the 20 team tag team battle royal that Joe and Mike come out and clean the ring. We were in that deal. So they took me off the road, and I was making good money, but I wasn't making the real money that was up there at the time. So, I said, well, I called Cornette up and I said, would it be okay if I just worked some indies? And he talked to JR, who had met me in Smoky Mountain, I think, and he liked my work ethic. I tried to show up on time and do what I was told, not be a problem. So, that got over with JR. So JR said, yeah, just don't get hurt. So I went right back and started working indies again. And did that and was off the road. And, I was still getting a check from them, but I was also, making a little money off the indies. But a lot of times a lot of times since I was getting the money from New York, a lot of times I'd cut myself short just to, get a chance to go work. Because I knew the more I was working, the better I was getting. And about 8 months later, Jimmy called me and says, "Hey, listen, I don't know if you've heard or not." He said, "But I was about to strangle somebody in Stanford, so they've moved me back down here to Louisville. Me and Danny Davis are opening up." Or Danny had already had it, but I guess Jimmy had bought into it with him or something. And he told me, and he laid out the whole Bull Buchanan ideal.
Oh wow!
And I said, "Hell yeah, man! Shit, I'm on the next thing smoking." So went there, did that, and had to run with Boss Man, Right To Censor, the whole thing. Well, once we bought WCW, everything got kind of jumbled up, so we were off the road again. So once again, I just called JR this time. I just said, "Hey, man, now I'm making really good money, and I get nervous when people are paying me and I'm not doing anything. And you never know if they really know, if you just kind of slip their mind."
True.
But yeah, and he said, "Shoot, yeah, go down there and do something." I said, maybe we can figure out another character." So called Jimmy up, and of course he was, "Yeah, come on." I was there next week, but yeah, and then started doing some house shows and got back on the road, and they put me with Cena, and yeah.
And when your first initial time in OVW, you would be a part of Bolin Services
Bolin
with
Services.
Kenny Bolin, Rob Conway, and Mr. Black. And you and Mr. Black actually became OVW Southern Tag Team Champions.
Yes.
How did you find out you would be a part of Bolin Services?
Jimmy laid it out. I'll never forget it. I was at I think I was in Nashville at my wife's parents' house. We were up in Nashville at the time when he called me, and he laid it all out to me. And the original idea for Bull Buchanan and what I did in OVW with it was I was a prisoner. And I was on work release, and I had the white pants with the blue stripe. I had the whole thing. They brought me out in handcuffs. I'd bust out of them. But he told me about Kenny, and I'd never met Kenny. But Jimmy told me, he says, "Yeah," I said, I'd heard about Kenny. I take that back. I had met Kenny in Smoky Mountain. But I'd heard all about him, and it was funny because it was, he's witty the same way that Cornette is. He's quick with those one-liners. But so they put me in the group, and so I started coming up, and I was driving. I wasn't living up there. I was still living at home. I was living at home, and I was driving up from Georgia on I think it was Wednesdays. Yeah, Tuesday night was St. Teresa's, and then Wednesdays was TV.
Right.
So what I had done, my father-in-law had a carpet business. I figured, an easier way to do it would be I would just drive up, on Monday to Nashville to my father-in-law's, and I'd hang out with him, help him with his carpet jobs. And then on Tuesday, I'd drive up to St. Teresa to do the show. Well, I could drive back from Louisville to Nashville. It's like 3 hours. So I drive back at night, sleeping kind of my own bed, and then drive back the next day. And then, it was kind of a halfway point.
Right.
But yeah, he, I would drive up there, and of course he, always take care of me. His whole trunk was full of coupons.
Oh, wow.
From movie theaters, you never missed a movie or a milkshake with Kenny Bolin because he had a coupon for it. But I loved the guy. I was so, it broke my heart to hear about him and Jimmy having their whole falling out, because man, guys been friends that long, but yeah, man, he took care of me, and man, we had a good time. We enjoyed each other's company, and we enjoyed, what we were doing.
Right.
At that time.
Exactly. Who were some of your favorite people to work with in OVW during your time there?
Oh man, there's so many that, when I first went down there, I think it was me and maybe one or two other guys that were actually on contract with WWE, and everybody else was Danny's guys. But Danny's guys were Rob Conway, Damager, Nick Dinsmore, God, I know I'm forgetting some.
Double action and
Yeah, Mr. Black,
mhm.
Flash Flanagan was down there. Uh, there were so many guys that were already Danny's guys that eventually made it, and so I worked a lot with Rob Conway. It was so easy. I'm sure it was. I'm sure it was a lot easier for me than it was for him. Uh, Same thing with Damager. It was always easy, and they were over down there.
Mm. Oh yeah.
So it was it was easy to get heat, and God, I thought I killed Damager one night. I dropped him right on top of his head, and it was one of the few times that Jimmy ever like snapped at me, but it was warranted. I mean, something got him crossed up, and he dropped in behind me and just landed on top of his head.
Oh.
I got back, and Jimmy was like, "What the hell?" I was like, "Oh, I'm sorry," but yeah, no, I think just so a little sore the next day, but I think he was all right. But and there was a lot of guys down there that people never hear about. Jebediah Blackhawk was down there at the
Mhm.
time. Like Mr. Black, he was great. Mr. Black was legit 400-pound guy, and he would go to the top rope just like that. I mean, it was like climbing up a ladder.
Oh yeah.
Uh, the Andretti's they were my favorite. The Andretti's, Vito, and
Vito and Vito.
yes. Um, God, who's some of the other guys down there? Um,
What about Disciples of Sin? With BJ
oh,
Payne and
the BJ Payne. God, BJ Payne, man, was a really good worker. I really thought there was another kid down there named Scotty Saber,
yes, yes.
and right as I was leaving and going back up to the main roster,
Mhm.
Scotty, I think, got signed to WCW, but I don't know whatever happened because
Mm.
never really saw him. I know he got signed to like one of their developmental
Right,
things,
right.
but I mean, he was real good. BJ Payne was a football player, and he was a strong dude. But man, he could. I mean, he was like he. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think they might have been friends. He was a lot like D'Lo Brown.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
He was uncannily agile for a guy his size.
Oh yeah. Definitely.
Uh, Lowrider.
Yeah.
Lowrider. God, man. Yeah, those so many.
What
God,
about like Trailer Park Trash?
oh, I can't believe I forgot Trailer Park Trash. Trailer Park Trash is one of the best guys you ever meet in your life. We had a match. We had a bunch of matches, but SmackDown came to Louisville. And I don't know if it's something we knew we were doing or if it was last minute, but me and him wound up having a match. They wanted us to have a dart match. And I can't remember anything we did out there, or all I remember is coming back through and everybody was, hell yeah, that was great. Uh, Trailer Park Trash. God, man, we worked a lot, and he was easy to work. The gimmick was so over,
Oh yeah.
so over.
Yeah, I had him on recently. Well, not recently, but it was kind of about a couple months ago. And so I got to interview him. Actually, I don't know if you know Johnny Smooth Johnny Spade.
Yes, Johnny
Yes,
Spade. Yes, he's another one.
he actually got me connected with him because I had Johnny Spade on first, and then
Yeah,
he got me connected with Trash, and so I had Trash on, and he was a really good interview. And then you mentioned Jebediah Blackhawk. Jebediah is actually still with OVW to this day as a backstage like agent now.
really.
Yes,
He
yes.
was like my first match when I got there.
Oh, really?
And all these
Oh,
guys. I mean, Jimmy was pushing me as a monster.
mhm.
And all these guys put me over, and
Yes, yes.
um, and I never once, when it was time to return the favor,
Mhm.
I was glad to do it.
Exactly,
I
exactly.
guess, that's the way it's kind of supposed to work. I think I heard that one time somewhere.
Right, right. Um, how did you find out you were being brought up to the main roster for WWE?
uh, well, the first time in the Truth Commission thing, we just kind of got a call, said, "Hey, you got tickets?" We're because we did a few dart matches for them,
Yeah.
and we just got tickets, and boom, there we were. With Boss Man, it was a little different. That's when I was in OVW. I was in the shower. I think it was Monday, and I always drove up on Tuesday because St. Teresa's was Tuesday night. Jimmy also took into consideration that I was driving 9 hours one direction sometimes. So he usually, I mean, I hate to say this, and it sounds the wrong way, but I was already trained. I'd already been up to the roster. Uh, I was a little past the point of learning how to take. Not that you ever get past learning.
Correct.
I'm still learning to this day,
Mhm.
but I had the basics down, and I kind of had a grasp of what we were doing.
Yeah.
So he didn't make me come to all the classes and stuff. I usually drove up on Tuesdays, did St. Teresa's that night, and then Wednesdays was TV at the Mechanicsville,
Yeah.
uh, the building.
Mhm.
And then I would drive back to Nashville and then, drive all the way home at night. But I was at home, I was getting out of the shower, and Jimmy called. And he says, "Hey, you got to be at TV tomorrow." Well, this was Monday, and I'm thinking, St. Teresa's Tuesday. I said, "Yeah, I'm driving up." And he said, "No, no, no." He said, "You got to be at TV tomorrow. You're at SmackDown tomorrow. And you got to find a outfit like Boss Man." And we had talked many times, all the way back to Smoky Mountain. I didn't mention Ray Traylor when I was talking about all the people. Ray Traylor was a huge, of course, a huge influence once I got with him, but
Yeah.
he was also a huge influence. And he was another one that, he was from Cobb County. He wasn't, I always wanted to look like Lex Luger, but I didn't know if I could do it. You know, as a teenager, you're like, man, I don't know if I can get there. But looking at Ray, I was like, hell, he's normal looking like me. So he was another inspiration. And God, what a worker!
Yeah. Oh,
But
yeah.
yeah, they told me me and Jimmy had talked about several times, especially with me being the convict in OVW. I thought it would be a natural progression to bring me in as his trustee or something, an inmate that he had helped out somewhere down the line, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, uh, but I was surprised when they said you got to find an outfit like his. I said, so I'm going from a prisoner to a prison guard.
Guard. Yeah.
Okay. Now, if you ever seen it, in me and OVW, I was bald and I had a pony, about an 8-inch ponytail
Mm-hmm.
coming out of the back. I really embraced this prison thing. I was watching a series called Oz that was real big back then,
Mm-hmm.
and it was about inside the prisons. It was real raw, real. So I fully embraced that gimmick. But yeah, but I couldn't find a vest, and I had never met Ray because when I was up there before, Ray was still in WCW.
Mm-hmm.
So he had come back while I was off the road. So I'd never met Ray. And met him. It was like I knew him for 100 years. Uh, and he took me right in and actually had an extra vest for me.
Oh,
And it was actually, I think, the one that it was the vest that he got hung. Oh, he got crucified by the Undertaker.
Undertaker. Yeah. Oh,
And
wow.
I still have that vest. I still have it. His wife gave it to. Actually, I'd given it back to him after we got done with the gimmick, and I really didn't want to, but I didn't want to. I didn't want to act like a mark, so I gave it back to him. And then after he passed away, his wife Angie, we were over at the house one day. She said, "Hey, I got something I think he'd want you to have," and
Oh, wow.
she gave it to him. He said, "Yeah, real cool." But yeah, it was all of a sudden spur of the moment, and you know, bing bang boom, there I was, and that's what I try to impress on these guys, man. You have to be ready. I mean, you have to have your feet already running. So when they
Mhm.
turn you loose, you hit the ground and you're gone. Uh,
Exactly.
if you're
Exactly.
waiting, if you're just sitting waiting, well, I'm gonna do it tomorrow, and I'll get in shape tomorrow. I'm gonna get that new gear. They're gonna call it the worst time
Yeah.
when
Oh,
you're
yeah.
out of shape, you don't have a tan. Your hair's long, or you ain't got your nails done, or whatever. That's
Mm-hmm.
when they're gonna call.
Yeah.
So there's never really an off season. At least that's the way I looked at it.
No, it's true. It's true. And when you were teaming with the Big Boss Man, the late great Big Boss Man Ray Taylor, um, I mean that tag team division. There was so much depth in the tag team division back then, in the Attitude Era, and so like you had teams such as Edge and Christian, Too Cool, Scotty Too Hottie, and Grandmaster Sexy. Brian Christopher, rest in peace, Brian
Yeah,
Christopher as well.
yeah,
The APA, Bradshaw and Farouk. The Headbangers, Moss and Trasher. The Hardy Boys, Jeff and Matt. The Dudley Boys, Devon and Bubba Ray. And then even the Brothers of Destruction, Kane and The
yeah,
Undertaker.
yeah.
Can you talk about the tag team division, like being a part of that tag team division back in those days?
Oh, it was on fire, man. I mean, like just all those teams you just listed. I mean, how many Hall of Famers are there in there? You know, and it was so many different styles too. You know, I think that's
Mhm.
what made it work. You know, there were so many different styles. I mean, uh, you know, you had the Hardys that were the high flyers. You know, Edge and Christian. You know, but you know they were so charismatic. You know, Ron and John just damn maulers. Uh, you know, the Dudley boys, they had the whole, the tables and everything. And yeah, and you worked with everybody back then. You
Oh yeah.
worked with everybody. Uh, so I mean, even the not so good matches were still pretty good. I mean, it was hard to have bad matches with those guys. If I had to pick if I had to pick a favorite, I enjoyed working all of them. I'll say this: I never worried once about getting hurt with the Dudleys. And I say that because the stuff the stuff that people see them do, all the tables and all that stuff, you think it really is dangerous. They always go out of their way to take care of you, and got to be friends with both of them. Wound up traveling with Devon later on when him and Bubba broke up for that little period. Uh, the Hardys, I knew them all the way back to I started about the same time they did. And
Wow.
we met up in North Carolina or North Georgia, I think. You know, the old Wild Side Anarchy here down in Cornelia, Georgia. We met all the way back to then. Um, Edge and Christian, Kurgan and Luke Poirier, Sniper of the Truth Commission. They knew them from Canada, so they did TV and they did a house show loop with us, and I can't remember if they rode with us or maybe they followed us in their car, but they hung out with us that whole. So I knew those guys for a while.
Mhm.
Um, Kane, I worked with Kane down in Smoky Mountain. And I had known Taker, since so you knew all those guys and they were all great. I guess my favorite matches were with the Acolytes,
With
Ron and John.
acolytes.
Yes, because we were friends, and we rode together sometimes, and man, you, you knew it was going to be a fight, but it was fun.
Yeah.
Uh, you always left there, with a few bumps and bruises, but
Mhm.
nothing ever serious, and it was always fun with those guys. It was fun afterwards too, because and anytime you did the bar fights with them. Of course, you had to have the obligatory 4 or 5 shots beforehand, and then however many afterwards. But so yeah, it was fun working with those guys, man.
Definitely. And like I said, the tag team division back then was so great. And I think nowadays, going up to nowadays WWE is, it looks like they're starting to get back to the focusing on tag teams. There's not as much depth, especially with the brand splits and everything
Yeah.
nowadays, but they're starting to get back to it. It seems like it. Um, how did you find out you would be a part of the RTC with Steven Richards, the Good Father, Val Venus, and Ivory?
I was kind of flying solo after they broke me off from Boss Man. He had to have a knee scope and a couple other things, so they were letting me go solo at the time. And I was having a lot of singles matches, and we were in Albany, New York, and Stevie Richards come up to me, and Stevie and I had met at ECW, but we'd gotten to know each other since then and got to be friends. And so he came up to me and had no idea, and he said, "Yeah, they're putting you with me." And I didn't really know. I don't think any of us really knew what he was doing, because a lot of times, guys don't really talk about what they're doing. You just see what it is once they get out there. I thought he was doing. I thought maybe it was a Mormon thing or something with the shirt and the tie, and but he laid it all out to me, and I remember thinking to myself, "God, man, if they give this a chance, we can really get some heat off of this." And sure enough, I mean, they gave us a chance, and man, we got some heat off of it.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I loved Right to Censor.
Yeah,
Like back then, I mean, I didn't like love y'all, but like I love to hate
yeah,
y'all. But
yeah,
like y'all definitely did generate that heat very well, very good. And yeah, definitely one of those classic gimmicks
yeah.
from back in those
You know, and
our
it just
childhood.
kept, yeah, it just kept getting, you know, because with me, I mean, you know, I'd had to run with Ray, and
Mhm.
I was doing some single stuff, you know, but I hadn't really established who or what I was.
Yeah,
So people were like, you know, okay, you know, well, he's with him. But when we got Godfather, man, that's when people really started taking it serious. And then
oh yeah.
Val came, and then you know Ivory came,
Hmm.
and the real discipline. I mean, I think we could have run with it a little bit longer, but we had the WCW buyout, so things changed. But the only real disappointment I had, and I know they would hate to have done it, but if we could just pull it off for a week or two, I think we were in Madison Square Garden. I'm not sure, but they brought the Dudley Boys out in
Yes.
in the shirts and the ties, and people lost their minds. You know, Godfather was bad. Godfather was one of the most over guys up there at that time. You know, and even when he wasn't featured, you know, even when he was, you know, wrestling second or third match, or you know, doing something didn't really mean anything, he was still over because the people loved the gimmick so much.
Hmm.
Because the gimmick was him,
Yeah.
you
Oh yeah.
know, and uh, you know they really they hated that. But if we could got the Dudley Boys just to do it maybe for a week or two, just to get the people to buy into it a little bit. But
Yes.
yeah. I thought, man, if we could just get a week out of this, you know, just come back next week. People are gonna be so livid. But yeah, man, it was a good time.
I remember like the when Godfather first came in as Goodfather, a part of RTC, where the hoes would
Yeah,
they would walk through the crowd and try
yeah,
to distract during the matches and whatnot.
yes. You know, and that's Victoria.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah,
there at the end, because we were literally going. I say we. I don't. I'm not going to say that I went on any excursions for that, but we would go to towns and they would have. I don't remember who it was. You know, would go out to the strip clubs and get girls. You know, say, hey,
yeah.
I don't know what they paid them, but you know, you're going to be on TV too, so of course, you know. So they would bring the girls out there, and somebody, you know, came up with the idea, why instead of going to, you know, getting all these different girls, which I thought was better, kind of, you know, different variety, but they said, we'll just hire two of them. So they
Yeah.
hired Victoria, and I cannot remember the other girl's name, but she went by Frosty on screen.
Mm.
And something happened, and she didn't last long. But Victoria, I think she had a few of the baits. She knew how to bump that stuff like that. I think she had trained a little bit,
Mm.
but she actively sought out somebody to help her train. I think it might have been Dean Malenko at first, and then when Finley come in, he kind of took over. That dude don't get enough credit, man. Fit Finley,
Oh yeah,
he made the women's division. You know,
definitely.
I mean, he built that thing not necessarily creatively, but training those girls. I mean, as far as I know, he was in charge of most of it. And I mean,
Yeah.
Victoria, you know, she went to JR and said, "Hey, I want to do this. I want to. What can I do?" And they sent her out there, and we'd sit there and watch her bump and do stuff, and she took it all like a champ, and you
Yeah,
know, paid off in the end.
I
Paid off.
completely forgot that she was a part of, or that she was one of the girls that was in the crowd. But yeah,
Yeah,
now as you mention it, yeah, I definitely remember her being one of the girls.
yeah.
What did it mean to you being a former WWE World Tag Team Champion as part of RTC?
Oh, I mean, what bigger honor can you get? I mean, anytime you hold a belt in the biggest organization in the world, I mean, uh, the best part of it to me was I got to do it with guys that, you know, were friends of mine. You know, me and Charles Wright, the Godfather, me and him and Teddy Long were riding together.
Mm.
And we got to all be pretty good friends. So it was fun doing it with of course, I still got pictures. And I remember bringing the belt home the first time, and I got pictures of it sitting on my couch. I got pictures of my father-in-law with it around his waist. And everybody has to look at it and see and get the picture to it with it. So that belt ain't, it's still around here in the pictures. But me and D'Lo did the same thing over in Japan. We won the GHC tag belts, and
Mhm.
we ask because it's customary for them. Once the show's over, they pack the belts up. Since
Right.
you're on the tour bus, it's a little different over there.
Mhm.
And we ask them, say, hey, do y'all mind if we'll take care of them if we can carry them? And they were like, no, I'm not. Yeah. So first thing we do is get back to our rooms, start taking pictures of it on our beds. But I still believe I I hear people talk about the belts as props and things like that. The belt always meant to me that the company had trust in you.
Mhm.
And I know that's probably old school mentality. But back then, or even before, in the 70s and 80s, uh, if a promoter put the belt on you, it meant that he trusted you, that you
Mhm.
would be there when you're supposed to be there, you would do what you were supposed to do, and that you would draw money for the company. If you wasn't going to draw money, then you wasn't going to stay there very long. And what higher compliment could somebody give you than, hey, I trust you with my business? And you hear a lot of people talk sometimes about, that's why the promoters were always the top stars, because who could you really trust? The
Yeah.
Von Erichs, Fritz, he could trust the boys, because he knew the boys would be there. Other people come and go, but and so that's what the belt's always meant to me. It's
Mhm.
always meant more than a prop to me. Even from WWE all the way down here to tiny promotion in town, whatever. Uh, if the promoter thought enough to put the belt on me, then I took that as a compliment.
Exactly. And see, like I like that old school mentality of like he's talked about with the belts, because that's true. If a promoter's putting their belt on you, then that means they trust you. Like you
Yeah.
said, I love that you pointed that out. Um, so after Right to Censor, you would go back to OVW for a few months, then be brought back up and to the main roster on SmackDown, and eventually you would team or be paired up with John Cena as B2.
Yep.
What was it like working with now? So you worked with a young Rock as Flex Cavana, and then now a young John Cena. What was that like working with a young John Cena?
uh, it was great. I I think a lot of us knew he would be a star if they gave him a chance. He kind of just kind of took a chance. Took the ball and run with it with the whole rapping thing. But I'd met him I'd met him actually out on the West Coast when he was doing dart matches, and you know he looked like $1 million then. And then I got to know him when I was in OVW at that time. Uh, and once I heard him talk, I knew. I said, God, man, if he don't make it, it's a shame, because he had the look, of course, and he had the gift of gab. I mean, he could really nail a promo. And so once again, I was backstage, just kind of bumbling along, and uh, um, one of the producers, I don't remember who it was, came up to me and says, "Hey, we're putting you with the," because I'd been on the road, I'd been doing the house shows, and I'd been doing dart matches, and I had a couple of velocity matches against. Yeah, I had a velocity match against Matt Bloom, Albert, and we'd worked together a good bit, and worked even more together over in Japan. But thought we had a good match for two big men. I got to work Mike Awesome. One of my dream matches was me and Mike Awesome.
Mike Awesome.
Yes, because and as another guy I watched and kind of I got idea the running up the road, the where I jumped to the top rope. I got that from him. You know, he was a big guy, 6'5", 6'6", 280, and he could fly. I always thought, God, man, we could have a great match. And we actually did get to have a match. Unfortunately, he was just coming back from, I want to say it was like double knee surgery. I mean, he just destroyed his knees. But we had a good match. And, but yeah, and they told me I was going to be with Cena. And I had seen him, we knew he was doing the rap thing. And I thought, wow, this is a stretch. I'm thinking in my head, I'm saying, okay, the prison guard, that's an easy one. And I always approached the RTC. I always looked at it as like a Southern Baptist minister. My character, that's how I approached it. So that was fairly easy because I grew up in church,
Right.
That was pretty easy. But this was a stretch. I wasn't, I think maybe they saw it more as a like maybe a coat and tie kind of bodyguard kind of thing. But we took it in just a totally different direction. I figured, what the hell, let's have some fun. Me and Shelton Benjamin were riding together at the time. Me and him and Devon had been riding together. Me and Shelton were riding together at the time. So me and him got back. We just got to the building, and they told me, because it was like that night, hey, you're going out with him that night on SmackDown. Oh. So we jumped back in the car, went down to the mall, and I bought some Rough Rider pants, the wife beater. And because Eminem had just came out with a new CD. That's how old I am, CDs. Yeah. I listened to tapes when I was a teenager.
I remember the VHS, the cassette tapes.
So. Yeah, oh God, yeah. But I was listening. I just bought the CD and I was listening to it, and it hit me. I said, "Holy shit, Eminem, Slim Shady. That's the character." So we went to the mall, bought the necklaces and stuff. Shelton was with me. He helped me out. Went back, and B2 was born.
I love it. Now, how did you find out you were being released from WWE?
So I got to TV. I think we're in Meadowlands, and John came. John was already there. He came to me. And he says, "What the hell, man? What's going on?" I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "They're breaking us up." And I said, "Really?" Because we really didn't have that long of a run, but I thought we were. Well, of course he was getting over, but I thought the sidekick thing was working too. But so I went in and sat down with John Laurinaitis. He says, "Yeah, they're breaking you up," and I was like, "Well, where do I go after this? I mean, babyface?" Or he says, "Well, I don't know right now." So I said, "Okay, well, at that time Vince was a little more accessible, and by that time I had built a relationship with him. So I saw Vince in the hallway and I said, 'Hey, boss, can I talk to you for a minute?' So I went in and talked to Vince, and I just got the impression that, nobody said, 'Hey, we're going to let you go,' but I just got the impression that, the time might be up. So we go out and do the thing. I can't think I came back the next week on SmackDown. Yeah, I came back the next week, and actually, Red Dog, John turned on me. Red Dog jumped the rail. They put me in the post. Me and Red Dog actually had a match, but they cut it. And I thought it was a good match, but they cut it anyway. They never made TV. I had a copy of it somewhere around here, but anyway, I think John called me and said, "Hey, listen, we're gonna get you in the Royal Rumble this year and get you a payoff." So I said, "Oh, that's great." And it was one of those. I think it was 2003. If you look back at it, I was in there for like a total of 10 seconds. I ran in the ring, hit everybody 2 or 3 times, and then went flying out. So easy night, and of course Royal Rumble is a good payoff. Oh, yeah. And I think maybe he called me like a week later and said, "Hey, they're not going to renew your contract." And I said, "Yeah, I kind of had that feeling," but he said he was getting ready to go to Japan. He says, "Hey, listen," he said, I'll put the word out for you over in Japan." I said, "Okay, great, thanks, man." I said, "Hey, listen, this was in January, February, I think. And I said, my contract is, and I got to say this just to, you hear enough people complaining about WWE and people there. But I said, hey, John, my contract is actually not up until I think it was July. So it was about 5 or 6 months. And I was making a pretty good payday back then. I had worked my way up to the good money.
Definitely.
And I said, man, that make a big difference in, kind of getting me, pushed off and, getting me on my way. And he said, well, I'll see what I can do. And sure enough, they paid it out. So they didn't have to do that, but they did. As far as I know, Johnny went over to Japan, talked to Muda, and I think maybe 6 months later, I debuted in Japan.
Oh wow, wow,
So
that's saying a lot.
it's hard to say. I never had a bad day at work there because of course, the bad day was the last day, but the the way they acted on the way out was I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's very professional of them to do
Yeah,
that.
they didn't have to. Yeah, they
Yeah,
didn't have to.
exactly. Um, in 2011, November 14th, 2011, there was a segment on Raw. It was Mick Foley's Cena, This Is Your Life. So John Cena, This Is Your Life. How did that come about for your appearance on that?
So once again, I was sitting at the house and I saw the 203. Anybody that's ever worked in for WWE, the 203 area code is Stamford, Connecticut. You never know if to do cartwheels or cry. But 203 pops up and I'm like, God, man, this is random. And I said hello, and it was Laurinaitis. It was John. He said, hey, what would your availability be for next week, Monday? And at the time, I was still actually just I think I had not been to Japan that year. I think I quit going to Japan in 2010, but I was still doing indies around the house, And I said, oh yeah, whatever you need. Well, he said, okay, so, I'll let you know. I hung up with him and I walked right in the living room, and my son Brooks Jensen was sitting in there. He's 7 or 8 at the time, I think. And I said, Ben, where's Raw at next week? And he said, it's in Boston. I said, okay, it's something with Cena. Because I knew if it was in Boston, it had to be something with John. And sure enough, it but they brought me up, like always, first class treatment, stay at TV hotel, got to meet a lot of guys I had never met, Sheamus, some of those guys, Miz, got to meet them, got to see a lot of them, my friends that had been up there, got to see JR, so it was fun. And, of course, getting to do something like that, with John on TV, and then, Rocky was there too.
Yeah.
Uh, it's funny because it's, you know, and they've talked about it publicly now, so it's nothing that anybody doesn't know. They had a little rift going on between them there for a while, and it always struck me as funny because I always saw they were always so similar to me. Um, you know, when me and Rocky were down there in Memphis, I mean, none of us had any money. We were all broke. Same as John. Down in Louisville, or when he was out in California, we're all broke. We were all doing whatever we could to make it. And those two guys, as far as I know, unless something's changed since the last time I saw them, they're still the down to earth people that they were back then. They hadn't forgot where they came from.
Yeah.
As they're still, and Brooks has got to actually talk to John down there at the Performance Center, and he's still the humble guy that he always was. It's always struck me as funny how big they've gotten, yet they're still down to earth people.
Exactly. Yeah, that's something to say for them too. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, for sure. Uh, now for those that if they don't know, of course we've mentioned it already, but your son Brooks Jensen is in NXT. Um, can you talk about what that means to you, him being in NXT and kind of following your footsteps?
Well, I knew he would. I knew he would. Uh, he's been in love with this, ever since he was a little kid. He had all the rings, he had all the action figures, all the video games. He always went with me to the independent matches. He was a big kid, and he he played basketball when he was smaller. And when he was in sixth grade, he came to me when I picked him up from school one day. He said, "Hey, Dad, I joined the wrestling team." And I said, "Well, that's great," because he at that time he was really not an aggressive kid. I said, "That's great." I said, "You understand that that's not what I do." And I could tell by the look in his eyes that he had no clue. He
Right.
thought, it was sixth graders pro wrestling. But he got in there and he just totally willed himself into actually a state champion wrestler. He won the heavyweight class in Alabama his senior year,
Oh wow.
and it was just off sheer willpower.
Mhm.
He turned himself into a good athlete, and he kept getting bigger and bigger. And at about 14, he came to me and said, "Hey, Dad, would you train me?" And I said, "Well," I said, "let's do this. I'll let you referee a few matches." And so I let him referee, kind of get his feet wet, get out in front of the crowd for the first time. And I think he actually had his first match maybe at 15. Uh, I was there. It was somebody I knew would take care of him. But I mean, God, he was already 6'4", 6'5", 230 or 240. So it was almost like a grown man anyway. And he just he hit the floor running, and I just tried to keep up with him. I drove him to the shows. I turned into uh, a bag toter myself. You know, guys see me. He comes in, and here I come pulling bags. Uh, but yeah, and so there was a seminar in Atlanta. Um, I think it was his senior year. I think he had just got finished with wrestling season. There was a seminar, and William Regal was going to be there. And he wanted to do it, and he had a part-time job, and he saved his money, and he paid whatever it was, and it was for Evolve. Actually, Evolve came to Atlanta.
Oh wow.
Gabe was up here, and they did a little tryout, and me and Regal knew each other from, of course, the Fed, but we'd also been down in Memphis for a minute also together. So we had we were friends. So he came over and sat down with me when he was doing his tryout match, and we were talking. I told him, I said, I'd really like for him to get some experience, like maybe go to Japan for a couple of months, that kind of thing, and then come to y'all guys a little better prepared. So he did the little thing. It was a few months later, uh, right, and this was right before COVID hit.
Oh
This
wow.
was right before COVID hit. This was maybe like a week or two before the whole COVID thing, and then everything shut down.
Yeah.
But he continued to train. We went down to the high school and trained on the monkey bars and stuff. He was out there doing pull ups on the monkey. I mean, it was real like uh, Rocky Four, Rocky and Dragon training in the barn. It was that kind of thing. And I got a call from Regal, I think maybe in September, October of that year, and he said, "Hey, listen, I know you was wanting him to get some more experience, but things have pretty much shut down in Japan," because his son was over there at the time. Charlie Dempsey. He was over. He said, they're not doing any visas. He said, we're fixing to have a little tryout. I'd love to have him down here. So I said, yeah, give him a call. So he called him, and he went down and did well. I think him and Braun, maybe Trick, uh, and Bodie Hayward. God,
He was
Jesus,
a part of Chase U.
Chase U,
Yeah.
yes, Chase U. That's one of my favorite things of NXT. Chase U.
Same.
Bodie Hayward. There was a pretty good tryout class, and but he didn't go down. he had signed, but he didn't go down directly. He went down, I think, with the next class in maybe August of that year.
Mm-hmm.
But he was only down there. He was down there through me and my wife. We had just sold our house over in Alabama, and we were actually at the closing. And I got a call on Tuesday night. And he says, "You're not going to believe this." I said, "What?" He'd literally been there 3 weeks. He said, "I'm on TV tonight."
Oh wow!
I said, "You're not. You're kidding." He said, "No, really. I'm on TV tonight." So, yeah, he's been rolling ever since.
It's so awesome. Like I said before we started recording, I love one of my favorite reasons of getting to talk to you, not only because of your career and watching you, but also now watching him. And so that's really cool to me. Um, now, you've given a lot of advice on this episode and during this interview. What's the biggest piece of advice you could give to someone that to a kid that's wanting to break into the business, or maybe someone that has already just getting started breaking into the business?
Uh, there's lots of stuff, but the one thing it all boils down to the easiest, and I've told people this, and if anybody knows me, they've probably heard it. Uh, and I say it because somebody told me it wasn't my ideal or my line or somebody told me, but I've based my career and actually kind of my life on that. You never let anybody outwork you. I tell guys all the time, when you walk into a dressing room or you walk into a training center or you walk into a gym or whatever you walk into, you find the person in that room, gym, whatever, that's working the hardest. You find the guy that's over there in the corner doing Hindu squats by himself while everybody else is looking at their phones and, playing grab ass and that kind of thing. You find that guy and you outwork him and you'll be successful. I mean, it's just hard work. It's just getting in there and perfecting your craft. There's a lot of guys that didn't have a lot of talent that made huge careers. It's all about hard work. I mean,
Definitely.
really, there's a lot of other stuff. I mean, especially nowadays, I tell kids, uh, you got two ears and one mouth for a reason.
Yeah. Yeah.
Back when I broke in, you just sat there and listened. You didn't talk to people unless they talked to you. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you get cussed out real quick, thrown out of the dressing room, Uh, but them guys that have been doing this 20, 30 years, back in 1992, they didn't care anything about what I had to say. I had nothing. What could I tell them? They guys that main evented, the Superdome in New Orleans or Madison Square Garden, or what am I going to tell them?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to listen to what they're saying.
Right.
So, it's just, this whole thing's built on respect. We're trusting each other with our bodies, our livelihoods, our lives in some instances. Um, you got to respect each other. You got to, you trust me when I say there's a lot of guys that have drew millions and millions of dollars that did not like each other, but they did business with each other.
Right.
At
Right.
the end of the day, that unfortunately we all love it. We'd all do it for, probably a lot less money than we'd like people to know. But at the end of the day, this is a bit, and that's another great one of the best pieces of advice I ever got was from Mike Jackson, a guy who's made the greatest comeback in the world. Mike Jackson, 78 years old or 73 years old on TNA
Mm-hmm.
Impact. He told me years ago when I first started. He said Barry. He said when you start thinking about this as a business, you'll start making money.
Mm.
And the more I thought about that, mulled it over in my head, I understood what he was saying, and he was right. When you start thinking about this as a business, you'll start making money. Uh, and that, that's what it's all about because we're tearing we really are. We're tearing our bodies to pieces
Mm-hmm.
doing this. So you have to, you need to financially make sure that you're somewhat covered. I mean, you never save as much as you want to, but you know, looking down the line at some of the things that you're going to encounter when you get older, you need to have a little money stuck back. So that's why you have to look. We all love this, and we'd all do it for free. I've done it for free many times. Probably do it again for free if I could. Maybe none of the promoters will hear that, but you know what I'm saying. I mean, at the end of the day, you have to make it a business.
Exactly, exactly, and that's all great advice right there. And thank you for sharing that advice. And I definitely
Yeah.
encourage anyone that's looking to get into the business, and or if you're just starting out in the business, take this advice and don't just let it go in one ear and out the other. Listen to this advice and let it sink in. Um, Great advice right there. Um, and speaking of students and of kids, you let me know before we recorded that you are getting ready to open up a school. Is that correct?
Yes, myself and Tom Araquazo. He has a TV down here, WGTV. We got a Facebook channel, and I think also a YouTube channel. We're opening Bullpen Pro Wrestling. First show is June 8th. We're gonna have a training school. I already got 2 students. I got one. I've watched how specifically Hunter. Well, I watched how Jimmy ran OVW, and I've watched how Hunter and Sean and William Regal and a lot of other people
Mm-hmm.
have molded this NXT thing the way they have. They get those kids right out of college. Those D1 athletes that aren't going to the pros or don't know what else they're doing. They're getting those kids.
Mm-hmm.
So my ideal is to do the same thing, just on a smaller schedule, on a smaller platform. Tom Araquazo and WGTV are affiliated with the public schools here in Carroll County.
Mm-hmm.
So we're recruiting kids that are coming out of high school that were good, that were football players, basketball players, track, gym, whatever, athletes. We're recruiting them, and we're bringing them in. Some of them right out of high school, and we're building a roster. We're gonna have a lot of the older guys. One of my best friends in the world, David Young, is coming down to work for me from TNA. David Young's coming down. A lot of other Rob Adonis, some other guys. But yeah, and 2 of my students now. I've got a kid from Temple. He's 6'6", 430, 440, I think. Good athlete. I got another one that was a outstanding high school wrestler. Uh, a former bodybuilder. So he's gonna be great. So yeah, yep, we got big things going down here.
Awesome, awesome. I love to hear that. And just by the way, when that first show, uh, before that first show starts happening, if you want to come back on and maybe send one of the wrestlers to come on, definitely love to promote it on our show as well.
Sure. Yeah, we love that. Yeah,
For sure.
we're taking a real we're doing studio wrestling again. He has a small studio.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to do studio wrestling in there, and we're going right down the road to Bowden High School, the old gym where I had my retirement show. We're going right down there on Saturday nights and running the show that night.
Love it, love it. Any other upcoming shows or appearances as far as that goes?
No, my younger son Zach, he's a senior this year. He just got done with his wrestling season and football season. He'll be in Rome, Georgia Saturday night at Diller's Music Park, and he's going all over. He's 6'3", 6'4", 230, 240-ish. So he's looking to follow Brooks Jensen down to NXT, I guess.
Definitely, definitely. Fans, if you're in the area, go out and support. You said his name is Zach. Is that correct?
Zach Buchanan. Yep.
Go out and support Zach Buchanan as well. If you're in that area, and get out and support indie wrestling wherever you're at.
Yes.
How can fans find you on social media?
I'm on Facebook, Bull Buchanan. We've got the Bullpen Pro Wrestling Facebook link. That's about it. I got an Instagram account. I get on there sometimes, not as much as I should probably. Uh, check it out. But yeah, just Facebook mostly.
All right, fans, go follow Bull on his social media, and go, of course, follow Bullpen as well on social media as well. And we'll be sure to share the link in the description of the video of this episode. And then one last thing: how can promoters contact you for their next show, or maybe to come in for an appearance or something?
Just hit me up on Messenger on Facebook. Yeah, just hit me up on Facebook.
All right, promoters, if you're out there listening, go get Bull Buchanan for your next show or your next event, whether it's a con or a wrestling con or Comic Con, something like that. Go bring him in for your next show or your next event. You definitely won't be disappointed. And with that being said, Bull, I definitely love to thank you again for coming on the Final Count and being our guest on this week's Spotlight. I mean, you're welcome to come back anytime, sir.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Thank you very much.